know. I'll just use the word wise. Going back and forth. They give a signal that it says no service. It's only two. Maybe it's security. She didn't. Yeah, what she did, but it's actually what you did. I don't know how she did it. Oh well. be a good memory to the back.
Good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk Money. And some people walked in and I was like, oh, they look a little tight, shoulders are up. But it's going to be a great afternoon. And Mary Ann Parker, my colleague, is going to be sharing with you a little bit more about our speaker. So I know it's going to be filled with great information for you. But firstly, I wanted to welcome you on behalf of the College Counseling Office. My name is Jody Hester, and right back there is Peter Morgan, and then certainly we've got Mary Ann Parker, and so we are half of the College Counseling team. Our other colleagues aren't with us today. Well, we are thrilled. This is the first time we've offered this program on a Sunday afternoon. Typically, it's something we do on a Thursday evening, and we thought, you know what, let's just move it and see if people don't have to fight traffic, if we'll have a little bit more attendance. So we'll see what happens, but we're thrilled you could be with us this afternoon. I hope everybody picked up the handouts as you came in, and so just enjoy it.
Thanks so much, Jody. There are 5 of us in the College Counseling Office, as you all may or may not know, and we are here along with our Administrative Coordinator, Meg Jordan, to help both your students, especially your students, but you too, throughout this transition into college. So our Director, Brian Rutledge, sends his greetings, as does Jesse Bowen as well. And if you have questions or concerns or want to see the program again, it will be taped. So feel free to tell your friends or spouses or helpers that you want to see it, but Meg Jordan will help you get connected to that online if you have any questions. So we are pleased to have you, as Jody said, but particularly pleased to have with us our wonderful presenter, David Gelinas. David is here as the Director of Financial Aid from Davidson College in North Carolina. And not only does he bring great expertise, I value, David, the fact that you can add a little humor. Sometimes it is greatly appreciated when we're talking about money and how we're going to spend big sums of it, or secure other ways to help our students, make that smooth as possible transition into the college setting. So Dave has a wonderful history as the director at Davidson. He's been there since 2008. And prior to that, he spent 22 years as Director of Financial Aid at University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee. So great expertise on 2 different institutional bases. He's heavily involved in his national organization of financial aid administrators in colleges and universities. He has led programs, been on committees, made presentations, even been recognized by them as one of their distinguished speakers, members, presenters, and at first even serving as chairman of the group. So that is a very impactful organization. So we kid and call him the guru of financial aid, and I think you will agree with me after you hear his presentation. He really is wonderful, and David, appreciate the fact especially that you take on questions. A lot of presenters do their presentations, say their remarks, sell their products, and go. He has nothing to sell other than to share with you very helpful information. So, Dave, thanks so much for coming down and being with us. I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Good afternoon. Oh, we'll try that again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good. I know you're alive. That's a good sign. Well, thank you for being here today, and hopefully I can help you with this particular process. I would say focus on any one of the screens, but for some reason we haven't quite figured out, that one keeps turning off. Okay, so you can stare at that one as long as it's there, but it may not be there forever. Okay, just let you know. How many of you are doing this with the first child in the household going off to college? Oh my gosh, okay. It's Sunday. Should we pray first? Would that be helpful? My goodness. How many of you are doing boys? Oh, okay. I did boys too. Okay. Okay, so I have to ask you this question. How many of you get grunted at when you have questions for your boys? Okay, yeah. And you have to interpret the grunt, right? Was that a rising grunt? Was that a descending grunt? Was that a neutral one? Okay. Because I've been through that myself. And so as I tell people, not only have I been doing financial aid now for over 37 years, I've also sent my own children to college, so I know exactly what you're experiencing. And I have to confess, if your children are treating you as though you are an idiot without a village, hey, been there, okay? I even had one of my sons say to me, well, what do you know about this? Like, dude, I do it for a living. Come on. Well, that's not what my counselor says. I know. I called the counselor because I was a personal friend, and I said, I don't think you said that. He said, of course I wouldn't have said that. I said, gotcha, okay. So, been doing this for a long time. Before Sewanee, I actually was at a school in Montana, and before that, I started my career at the University of Michigan. So, been at a big flagship. I've been in an open admission small school, and then I've been at selective schools since 1986. So, familiar with all of those kinds of things. And this presentation is built around the kinds of questions people ask. You know, how do I, or what about this, and so on. So this is what this is designed to do. And we'll start with the most basic question that people ask, which is how am I supposed to pay for this? And you have an advantage. You understand what paying for education feels like. You've been doing it. I do this in a public setting where students have been in public school since kindergarten, and they're not familiar with, oh my gosh, I'm paying for an education. So you've got a background that makes you a little more, I hope, comfortable with the concept of paying for college, because you've been paying for school. And if you think about paying for school, really, and you're probably already doing this, okay, what have I saved and I'm using that? How am I diverting my current income to help pay for schooling? Perhaps I'm even looking at borrowing, because it's a major expense, and in many cases when there's a major expense involved, that may involve the need to do some financing, which spreads out the time frame over which you are paying for that particular obligation. And of course, the last one, which is what I do, is, well, what about getting some money awarded to the child to help with the expenses? And if you think about the first three of these, really, whether you're saving, using your current income, or borrowing, there's some degree of sacrifice involved. And the question is just, how do you plan the sacrifice? Has it been putting money away that you could have diverted elsewhere? Is it going to be diverting current income? Is it going to be having to borrow and then it becomes an obligation to be serviced? So all of those are potential aspects of the world of paying for college. Now, in the world of rewarding, we've got two basic philosophies that we use as institutions. And the first philosophy is, well, the student needs this money. Their financial circumstances show us that this student and family do not possess the capacity to pay for the entire cost of this given institution. And so we look at need-based eligibility. Now we start from the concept of, first place we look for paying for college is the family. But once we've looked there, then we look to see what else might the student qualify for. How might we work with that level of qualification they show us. The second concept of awarding financial aid is we look at the student, him or herself. And we just say, what does this student bring to our equation that we feel is meritorious in our eyes as an institution? And as many institutions as you can possibly think of out there in the great wide world, there's that many definitions of what constitutes merit. So I always tell people, I spend more time on need-based because there's more commonalities among schools when we talk about the need-based process. And there's far less commonality among schools when we talk about merit. Because at one school, merit could mean X. Another school, that could be every student who goes there. Another school says, oh, merit is Y. And a third school says, yes, but Y is everybody who comes here. And you're thinking, but aren't you all like schools and doing merit? Like, yes, but we don't all do that the same. Now, we would certainly encourage students to apply for any merit that they may think they qualify for. And for many students, they apply for both need-based and merit-based. And then the institution determines how that all comes together. So we would never discourage a student from at least applying. I will say that as you go up the higher education prestige pyramid, the closer you get to the peak, the less likely those schools are to award any merit at all. Because in their world, the merit is you got in. You know, because how many students applying for each available spot, and if we took you, we're acknowledging you're a meritorious person. So now, having acknowledged that by admitting you, we're going to work with the need that this group of very meritorious people shows us. And so and people say, well, I applied to this particular school and they have no merit scholarships. No, because you know what? Getting in, that's the merit. That's really where you show who you are. Because their admissibility rate is so low, an admission offer, that's where the merit really is. So after that point, they're just looking at who needs the money. So just be aware of different philosophies among different schools. Now, let's talk about need-based, because like I said earlier, this has got some commonalities from one school to the next that you would be familiar with. And please note the way the question is worded. This is important. As much as it is the student who applies for admission, it is also the student who applies for need-based financial aid. It's their application just as much as it is their admission application. Will you be involved with the process? Absolutely you will. But whose application is it? It's the student's. So you want the student to be aware that they have ownership over this process. One of my colleagues uses the analogy, they're driving the bus. You're helping put gas in it, but they're behind the wheel. So students have the responsibility to take ownership of applying for aid just like they take ownership of applying for admission. And there are some standard forms that you will encounter in the world of applying for financial aid. So in the need-based realm, you see there are two forms on this slide. The first form, the free application for federal student aid, that's a given. If you're applying to a school for any type of need-based aid, be it federal, potentially at the state level, at the institutional level, a FAFSA will be filed. The one cohort of schools which really doesn't care about this form would be the service academies. So if you have a student who's thinking about an appointment to a service academy, this really doesn't apply because the service academies, as you're well aware, do what they do much differently than other higher education institutions. But short of that, everybody else is going to say, want to apply for need-based aid? Fill out a FAFSA. It's an online form. You see the website there. We say to students, fill it out, get it into us. That way we can evaluate it to determine your eligibility for federal aid, potentially state aid, and some schools for institutional aid. The second form you see, which is the College Scholarship Services Profile Form, that is in addition to a FAFSA. So a student who's applying for aid at a school that takes both forms would fill out both. Now I will ask this question because this is potentially important. Does anyone have a student who is either a non-U.S. citizen or a non-permanent resident? Your student is a citizen of another country. Okay. The reason I ask that question is, in that case, a profile school would only need the profile form because there couldn't be any eligibility on the federal and potentially state side. So if your student is a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, and it's a school that uses the profile, they would do the FAFSA and the profile form. Profile form is a fee-based form, so you would not fill it out unless the school says they want it. Here in Georgia, there are 3 schools out of all the schools in Georgia who ask for the profile in addition to the FAFSA. And when I checked, it was Berry College, it was Georgia Tech, and it was Emory. And those were the 3 schools that said we also want a profile. Now, if you go to the website you see here on the slide, it lists all the schools across the entire spectrum who asked for a profile. And since the profile is not a governmental form, it also is used by schools overseas and in other countries. So, there's a school in Hong Kong that collects the profile. McGill University in Montreal collects the profile. So it can be used beyond the United States. As I say, it's fee-based, so you're not going to do it unless the school needs it. Question I often get is, can I get it to a school that doesn't yet show they want it? And the answer is no. They have to have signed up with the College Board to be a recipient school and have set up all of the background information in order to get that data. So you only use it for schools that say, yep, we're one who wants it. And depending upon the school of schools, it could be this cohort of schools only wants a FAFSA, but this cohort also wants the profile in addition to. And the only thing we use the profile for is for awarding institutional aid. So we can't use it for any federal money, can't use it for any state money, but we do use it for institutional awards. Davidson's a profile school, and we use that information because we are awarding significant amounts of Davidson's own institutional aid dollars. Then there are some additional forms a school might require. And again, they would post this on their website, so you'd want to look to see what do they need from me in my set of circumstances against the student. What do they need from me in my set of circumstances that may require more than just a FAFSA or more than just a FAFSA and profile form? And that would be listed there. I can tell you that we have our 2018-19 information on our website saying this is what we need from you. Those of you who are now applying for 18-19, here are the things we want. Here's how you can connect to them. So you want to check to see, because there could be some supplemental forms beyond just the ones that are the standard FAFSA, standard profile form. Does anybody have a student who is thinking of applying for admission to more than 10 colleges or universities? Okay, how many do you think?
Probably between 12 and 15.
Okay. The reason I ask that question is the FAFSA only allows up to 10 schools to be listed when you file. So there is a complexity to get the other schools on that form. Just want to let you know that. Okay. But there's a limit of 10 FAFSA schools you can put down at one time. And you'd have to, really quickly, you'd have to take some of the original 10 off after the initial filing to put new ones on. Because 10 is the limit it can take at any one point in time. And that's why I asked. Okay. Now, what are you going to put in these forms? Pretty straightforward. Whose application is it? It's the student's, so we start with student data. Student tells us about him or herself, their own resources if they have any. Not every student does, but some students have filed their own tax return. Some have their own assets they report. So tell us about that. There are some questions that are then asked related to their dependency, and depending upon how those questions are answered, either the student stops with only their data, which is very rare for students coming out of high school, or they now must put down family data. And so if they haven't put family data, then we move to the family section of the form. Information about the family, about parents' own resources. We then ask about where do you want the data to go. So FAFSA up to 10 schools. Profile, no limit. You can send as many of those off as you'd like if the schools that you're applying to want them. And then the data has to be signed for accuracy and agreeing that if there are questions on the part of the school in order to clarify information, agreement the school can ask those questions and that they will be answered. Now there have been some changes in applying for aid. Now for many of you, since you're sending the first one off, you've never done this before, not a big deal. But going back in time, there had been the world of, oh my gosh, it's January. Schools want financial aid data by January or early February, and they want it on the tax year that just finished on December 31st. How do I pull this all together in the middle of a month that I haven't even seen all my forms yet from the banks and my employer and so on. And that was what was called the prior year concept. So through 2016-17, the profile and the FAFSA used what was called the prior year. What was the prior year? The year prior to the one you're applying for aid for. So for 16-17, the prior year was 2015. Over time, they determined, you know what, from one year to the next, for the vast majority of filers, things don't change all that much. Why stress everybody out in early January, February, when we can maybe back it up a year that we asked for and give more time to fill the forms out? So they went to, and it's the actual terminology, they went to the prior year. Now you and I would say 2 years back, but the actual terminology is the prior year. So what does that mean? So that means for those of you who are going to fill out a 2018-19 FAFSA and profile, or one or the other, you're going to use calendar year 16 income instead of scrambling to put calendar year 17 income on that form. So think about your calendar year 16 income status. For the vast majority of you, perhaps maybe even all of you, you have filed your 2016 taxes. They're on file with the IRS. Now, having said that, I got a phone call Friday from someone who said, I have to have my taxes done by this Monday because I'm on double extension. And I said, okay, now let me back up what I'm about to tell you, because you're in a different realm from everybody else. But if you filed, they're there, and instead of having to wait to January to fill forms out, you can start filling out data for 2016 in October of this year. You don't have to wait till January. So you back up 3 months of time to open up the window wider to fill out financial aid materials. So starting in October of this year, you had 18-19 financial aid materials available. Didn't have to wait till January came around. Now, do you have to do it in October? I get this question. So if I don't do it in October, I'm dead, right? And the answer is, it depends. Depends on when the schools your students are applying to for admission are telling you they want the financial aid material filed. Are they saying file in October or you're dead? Or are they saying, hey, our deadlines are in December, our deadlines are in January? Then you might say, oh, okay, I can do it in October, but I don't necessarily have to do it in October. But your student will have to determine that. What are the deadlines I'm looking at for, and I'll pick this couple here, for the potentially 12 to 15 schools my students don't apply to? Do they have a full range of deadlines? Are any of them related to October, or are they all somewhat later? Once you know that, then you get a better sense of when do I have to engage with this process. Both the FAFSA and the profile are related to prior year. So 2016 being the income year in question. And for the FAFSA, because it's a federal form, there's a process in place that allows IRS data to go from the Internal Revenue Service to the U.S. Department of Education to populate information on the FAFSA, instead of you having to recreate it from your 2016 tax year. It's called IRS data retrieval. And it's really exactly what it says. You're retrieving your IRS data and using it to populate the fields on the FAFSA related to those income components. If your student filed a tax return, maybe your student filed a 1040-EZ, they had a little bit of income, they want to get back their withholding, they could retrieve, based upon the fact that they have a return in the IRS database. As you filed, parents, for your federal returns, you could retrieve and put it over on the FAFSA because you have data in the IRS database. And ideally, you would do this in order to avoid having to recreate the numbers for the form. Now the profile, because it's a non-governmental form, cannot use retrieval. So if you have to file a profile, you will have to put your numbers from your tax data on the profile. But you can avoid that on the FAFSA by using the retrieval process. There are some situations where retrieval doesn't work as we would like it to. Probably the most common one we're seeing is a married couple that does married filing separately. Because now you're trying to put two tax records into one FAFSA record, and it pretty much blocks it and says, wait a second, something's going on here. We're trying to get two records into one. So that's not going to work, okay? Now, you can retrieve data if you were an amended tax return filer, but as we have discovered, the retrieval is of the pre-amended return data, not from the amended return itself, which makes us all scratch our heads and say, why do we want to see the data that you had to amend in the first place? Wouldn't we rather see the amended data? And the answer is, well, you can, but you have to ask the parents for it directly. So I'm telling 1040X filers, you may want to just put your stuff down from your 1040X and be done with it, because all I'm going to get, if I get retrieved data, will be your pre-amended return. And I'll still have to go back and ask you, can you please send me your amended return data so I can compare what's different between the two returns? Seems a little bit more complex, but it's doable, but I'm thinking I don't need to know what you didn't agree was accurate to begin with. That's why you did an amendment. You had to fix something. Let me just see the one you fixed, and we'll go on from there. Now, in doing data retrieval, as I mentioned, only for the FAFSA, you have to have filed your 2016 taxes to retrieve it. And starting with 2018-19, the data that moves from the IRS to the FAFSA will be encrypted. Prior to 18-19, the data moved unencrypted from database A to FAFSA. And this is supposedly a true story. I've read it in more than one reputable source. And that was, they found someone who tried to retrieve Donald Trump's tax return using the IRS data retrieval process in filing a FAFSA. And they realized, whoops, we have a problem. Okay? So they're now encrypting it. So what does that mean? Well, it means it's more secure, but it also means you won't see the numbers they move. So if you say, I want to retrieve my 2016 Form 1040 information, and you do the retrieval process, the fields that have been retrieved will simply say, transfer from the IRS. It will show you no numbers at all. Now, that does indeed protect your information. The question I've been getting asked is, and it's a fair question, how do I know they retrieved the right data for me? Okay? If any of you are Catholics, you'll understand the concept of sacred mystery. You also understand the concept of walking by faith. But you will not see your math. You will only see transfer. Now, when the school gets it, we'll see the numbers. And no, we cannot tell you over the phone when you call in all sincerity, asking us, do you have my child's data? And what does it say? And we would have to say to you, thank you for trying to call us. Have a pleasant day. Because we are legally prohibited from sharing that information over the phone. So, I've been asked the question, should I retrieve and trust it, or should I just put my own numbers in because I want to see what goes there? And I'll give you the same answer I gave you about merit, which is it depends. Same thing about when should I file my FAFSA? It depends. I can tell you that from the school's perspective, if we see retrieved data, we are permitted to take that at face value. Because that's where it came right from the IRS to the FAFSA. If you put it in yourself, the possibility exists that we at the institutional end may have to come back to you and say, prove it. We don't know what those statistics will look like. We've never done encrypted data retrieval before ourselves. But just know that the possibility exists that non-retrieved tax data could be subject to having to be verified by the schools. Just to let you know ahead of time. But this is how it's supposed to work. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We're hoping like all get out. This is not going to be more complicated than it had been. But the fact of the matter was, there were vulnerabilities in the previous retrieval, and as a result, they wanted to put in some security. And just to tell you, in March of this year, they just shut off retrieval cold. All came to work one Monday, and our various discussion lists were like, are your students having trouble retrieving their data? Yeah, mine are here. You know, well, maybe it's local. No, I'm in Hawaii, and they can't do it here. I'm in New York, they can't do it here. And all of a sudden, it just wasn't there anymore. And then like a week later, we got basically a general message to the financial aid population saying, oh, by the way, we turned off retrieval. Well, duh. We saw that, you know. And then they began to explain why. So retrieval was unavailable from March until October. Nobody could use it. And then they brought it back up with the beginning of the 18-19 processing cycle. So we're going to see what it all means. But just know that you'll be given the option to retrieve. You can opt not to. And what will that do at the school end in terms of having to verify what you put down? We don't know yet. It's too soon to tell. So I just tell you this in case you get to that point and think, I can't see anything. All I'm seeing is retrieve. Yep, that's what you'll see, but whether you want to live with that or not do something you don't see the end result of, I have to leave that to your decision to make. But that's how it's going to work starting. It has started with the 18-19 year. In terms of signing an electronic federal document, you need an electronic federal ID to do so. It's called the Federal Student Aid ID number, or ID identifier. Every student who files a FAFSA must have one. So your student has to have his or hers. And if there's parental data on that FAFSA, a parent must have an ID as well. So 2 separate IDs. And this is probably the most important part. Each must be attached to a unique email address and or cell phone number. Why is that important? Because we discovered that in some families, the family shares an email address. Or the family shares a cell phone. And so they were trying to put 2 different identifiers to one attachment of an email or a cell phone. And kind of like retrieval, one of you must be trying to break into somebody else's account, and they would shut down the ability to do an ID. So you want to make sure it's always unique. I'm telling students, don't use your current high school email address, because at some point, as much as Woodward Academy loves you, they will take you off their email server. And now you will have an FSA ID not attached to an active email account, and that will be bad. Because your student's FSA ID will be used for more than just signing a FAFSA. It will have a relationship to all of the federal aid processes they may be involved with throughout their college career. So they have to have the ability to have their own unique email address attached to their unique FSA ID. And the FSA ID is really very similar to any account you may have opened online. Create a username, create a password, you create some challenge questions, and that all helps to create this ID. The timing is up to you as to how you want to do this. The FSA ID can be created prior to doing a FAFSA. So if you wanted to go home today, and after you're reveling in the Falcons' victory over the Dolphins, if they don't beat the Dolphins, there's something really wrong. Okay? But when you're excited about that, let's do your ID today and get it over with. You can do that. Or you can do it in conjunction with the time you fill out a FAFSA. And you can see you've got email addresses there in the handout. However you want to do it, it's up to you. But your student will have to have one. and you, a parent, will have to have one as well. Both of you parents can have one, and each of you decide which one you want to use. That's up to you. But it has to be at least one parent FSA ID if there's parent data on the student's FAFSA. And of course, the student must have his or her. Parents, as you go through this process, and perhaps as future children go off to college, your FSA ID stays yours. You need not get a new one with new students coming along. But each new student will have to get a new one as they come along. So once you have yours, it's yours. It's your ID for student 1, student 2, student 3, the triplets, whatever the case may be. You keep yours. Each student gets their own. If you go back to school yourselves and file your own FAFSA, you still have your ID. That's you. So you do it once, and you're done with it. Each student does theirs once, and they're done with it. But each student has to have a unique one from the student before. So that's how this process. And this is how you sign the FAFSA. You use the IDs to sign the online form. Now, this is a question that parents really do care about, which is, can my child fill these forms out just on his or her own, and I don't have to put parental data down? After all, I've raised them till they are high school graduates. When they're 18 years old, they're on their own, right? Typically, no. At least for financial aid purposes. So just take a moment and look at the slide or your handout and say, could my students answer yes to any one of those criteria? Do you see any yeses in there? That's the question. And if you don't, that's not terribly shocking. Most traditional high school age students don't hit those triggers. Some do, some do not. Okay? And they really are straightforward. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Okay? As I tell students, if you were orphaned, you would not have a parent here at this presentation. So, okay, it's pretty straightforward. You should know if you're married or not. We would expect you to understand, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Where a lot of high school graduates, for some reason, get confused is they put down that, yes, they're going for a graduate degree. Now, keeping in mind they haven't yet gotten their undergraduate one. But, and I've asked this question, why would you say yes to a graduate degree? You haven't got your first undergraduate yet. Well, and this is at least one of the thought processes that was brought to my attention. What are they doing from high school? Graduating. What's the next thing they're going to pursue? A degree. Graduating. Degree. Ta-da! You know, and I stopped to think about it. I thought, well, okay. I would not think it through in that process, but I get it. You know, I really do. So, I've been asked if junior ROTC counts for veteran status. And the answer is no, it does not. But that has been a question I have received. Because they went and did something on some base at some point, and that was duty. Ergo, that means veteran, right? No, it does not. Again, I would not think it in those terms, but I understand where they're coming from. Okay. Emancipation is one parents have asked me about. I've emancipated my child. I'm sure you think you have. But it has to be through a court. It cannot be because you said, go forth, my child, and find yourself. It doesn't work that way. Homeless or risk of being homeless, this is where I say to parents, don't get any ideas. Okay. But this involves the ability of an authority to say they would certify the student's homelessness or risk thereof, not get out of my house. Okay. Although I did have one student one time, and I swear this is true, she said she was homeless, which really surprised us because she was now a rising junior. We thought, what happened between your sophomore and junior year to make you homeless? Especially since you also put parental data on your form. So we said, you answered the homeless question, what's going on here? Her parents had moved from her childhood home. They were now in a downsized setting, and in her mind, when she left school, she wasn't going home anymore. She was now going to her parents' house. And she said, well, I feel homeless. And we said, well, let's go back and read the question. Do you meet any of these? Oh, no. Then you're not technically homeless. So, but she, I did not laugh because she was really sincere. You know, this is the only home I've ever known, and now I can't go back there anymore because they sold it and they moved. Well, for financial aid purposes, that is not technically homeless. Okay? And then my friend who said, I don't know how to answer this question. And I said, well, you're either yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And I don't know about you, but whenever a teenager says, let me explain, you kind of sort of know something's coming. And he did, and honest to gosh, when he finished, I said, I don't know if you're married either. Based on what you've just told me, I don't know. You know. So we did some research. This is going to sound crazy, but this is what happened to him in this business 37 years. He had someone perform the ceremony whose credentials had been issued through one of those internet-based ministerial programs. I call it, the Church of the Holy Internet. You are a quote-unquote minister of the gospel. And the municipality where the wedding had taken place did not recognize that as being truly having legal status to perform a wedding ceremony. Now, they never... Would you and I think to look into the statutes of the town where the wedding is being performed to ask ourselves, could this person really marry me? Well, they didn't do that. And lo and behold, that was not an actual legal wedding ceremony. It was a wedding ceremony. He even showed me pictures. Beautiful reception. But it was technically not a marriage. And so I have to say, well, at least for the purposes of this forum, you have to say I'm not married. And then, as you might expect, I wonder how I'm going to explain this. Dude, that's your call. But honest to gosh, now that we've looked this up, you're not married. And I think he said, oh, maybe that explains why I never got any paperwork back. You're right. You never got any paperwork back because it was never accepted as an actual marriage. So, interesting things that happen. But these are all the questions related to dependency. And if you can't say yes to any one, then it means parental data goes on the form. Just that simple. So with that being the case, let's talk about how all this flows together as we make need-based determinations. And it starts with, what does it cost to go to a given school? What resources might the student be bringing that are independent of the school itself? And what are you being asked to contribute as a family based upon the data you file? And we just subtract the assistance and the contribution from the family from the school's cost. And if those are less than the cost of the school, then from a need-based perspective, student shows eligibility. They show that they need funds, and that's what we work with. So in terms of starting with the cost of education, as you might guess, we always start with tuition and fees. We've all got tuition and fees. Used to be able to say except for Cooper Union in New York City, but Cooper Union now charges tuition and fees. So if you know of a school that doesn't, I need a new example, because my Cooper Union example is now charging tuition and fees. So everybody's got tuition and fees, and it's going to vary, of course, from one school to the next. It can vary between in-state and out-of-state, private, public, 2-year, 4-year, but there's always tuition and fees. There's always room and board. Now, do any of you have students who are telling you they plan to live at home and start college locally and commute? Anybody have that scenario? Okay, so your students are going to do one of two things. They're going to live in some college's residence facility and eat some meals from the college's available meal plans, traditional residential room and board, or they're going to have their own place that they'll pay rent to some landlord somewhere and utilities, and they'll prepare their own food. Either way, room and board will be an expense they will have. And every student, in some form or fashion, incurs a room and board expense, so that's a given. Every student needs books and supplies. You're familiar with that, being in a private school setting. The one thing, are you having any e-materials here at Woodward lately?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So you're familiar with the world of e-materials, and many colleges and universities are also moving in that direction. So something to be aware of. Now that probably means that your student has some type of e-reader, which is great. If they don't, that's part of your book and supply world. You'll need an e-reader of some kind. Every student has an expense for transportation. If it's a residential college, you got to get them there in some form or fashion. Now, once they're there, they've got everything covered because they've got their room board taken care of and they've paid the tuition fees. But you have to get them there and back when it's not in session. The commuting student, of course, back and forth every day. But every student has transportation. And then lastly, every student will incur miscellaneous personal expenses, which is college for stuff money. Right? Your students are going to need money for stuff. Now, since none of your students plan to live at home while they go to college, they're going to discover that some of the stuff they've taken for granted is now theirs to purchase. Okay? Do you have like the Keebler elves of home products in your homes? You know, there's always an extra tube of toothpaste hidden somewhere, extra shampoo and laundry detergent. And, well, all of a sudden, students discover, oh my gosh, the elves didn't come to college with me. I've got to get my own, you know. So, oh my God, I'm responsible. You know, when I run out of shampoo, I got to get my own shampoo. When I run out of toiletry, I run out of laundry detergent, I got to get my laundry detergent. Oh my goodness. Well, that's why we build in the expectation of miscellaneous expenses, because students have to do that. Now, if you ever want to visit Davidson, come during a regular school day, because you will see our students very happily traipsing 1 block south of campus to the CVS pharmacy, and then lugging back bags of stuff to campus, because that's what they've gone and done. They have to go get their stuff, and the CVS is within walking distance. It's perfectly located. So we say to students, yeah, plan for that reality, because you will have to, and that's why we build in money for that. The other thing that's important about this is that our schools, when they quote you their costs, quoting you all 5 of these? Or are they only stopping at tuition fees and room and board? Are they talking about, here's how much we think a student needs for books. Here's what we think the transportation expense would be from where you are to where we are. Here's how much we think a student needs for their extras while they're a student here. Because if you don't have all 5 of the expenses, you don't have the whole picture. And that's something you would want to have, especially if you are somewhat cost conscious and wanting to compare cost of A with cost of B and so on. Because without that, you wouldn't have the full picture. So these are the 5 expenses we know every student will bump into in some form or fashion. Outside resources are the things that students apply for from sources other than the college or university itself. So here at Woodward, there's probably a listing of funds that students who are Woodward War Eagles can apply for. Correct. Okay. So that's where we'd say to your students, start there. Look at the list provided by your school that talks about, here are the funds I can apply for because I'm a student in this school. Then branch out from there. What are the local organizations I might apply to? The local foundations. You know, there's the Woodruff people in this neck of the woods, and Coca-Cola in this neck of the woods, and all those nice folks. So definitely look into those as well. See what you might apply for, and see where they're applicable. Are they based on certain majors, or certain, I'm going to a certain type of school? Maybe because I'm a male versus a female, or female versus a male. All those things could be reasons you would apply, or no, that wouldn't apply to me. Certainly, we encourage students to do this. Take it to school with you. You're going to bring these funds in addition to anything that your family's paying or the school might award you. Now, the other thing that tends to happen is these tend to be 1 year in nature. A lot of these organizations like to come every year and award them to new graduating high school seniors. There's no problem with that. At the college end, we're familiar with the reality that this is a 1-year program. That's great. If you find a renewable one, that's beautiful. That's really nice. But a lot of these are just, for a graduating senior to buy books with, a graduating senior to have funds to help cover whatever expense. But next year we're coming back and finding a new graduating senior to do it all over again. So no problem with that. But again, something a student can look into. Start with what Woodward makes available, and then branch out from there to see what else might be available in the area. Then there's the family contribution part of all this, and this is where all this information you've put down on your forms gets looked at. So you've filled out a FAFSA, potentially even a profile. You've reported fairly similar information, although I will tell you the profile asks for more of it than the FAFSA does, and the profile does ask some questions the FAFSA does not. So I'm going to give you an example of one question that the profile asks that the FAFSA doesn't. The profile asks the question, while this student you're applying for aid for is going to college, will there be other siblings still in private elementary, secondary school? And you probably want the school to know that. Hey, it isn't just Johnny going to UGA. It is also the siblings who are coming through and are going to a Woodward. That's a profile question. That is not a FAFSA question. So that's off the FAFSA entirely. And then the question I get is, well, how do I tell a FAFSA school, wait a second, it's not just this child going to college, there's other children also going off to private secondary school. You'd have to contact the school directly, because the FAFSA does not have a place to write anything in. Also on the profile is a question about medical and dental expenses. Did you have them, and how much were they in the calendar year that you're reporting about on the form? That is not a FAFSA question. So profile gives us more data. Now additionally, the profile asks one question which makes some people have a lot of heartburn and others say, big deal. There is no question on the FAFSA about the value of your home. The FAFSA excludes what it calls the principal place of residence. So there's nothing there that says my house is worth X and I owe Y on it and I have Z equity between those two numbers. That is not a FAFSA question. That is a profile question. So you're getting more data on both sides of the equation using the profile than the FAFSA provides. But this is all the kind of stuff you're putting on the forms. This is all what's getting analyzed. And the analysis then produces what's called a family contribution. Shorthand in our business is EFC, expected family contribution. Those three letters are the number we're looking at that represent the capacity of this family to pay for this year of college. And I use this year of college because you fill these forms out annually if you're reapplying for need-based aid from one year to the next. So 18-19 FAFSA applies just 18-19. Student goes back to college for 19-20, then they have to reapply using the 19-20. Go back for 2021, they have to reapply for 2021. At that point, I'm not worrying about it anymore. I've retired. So we hope 2021 works out beautifully.